Yeah, we have a quorum.
Chair Watson?
Present.
Member Strong?
Present.
Member Chisholm? And I did receive an email that there's another meeting, so.
Yep.
Vice Chair Emmelhuns?
Present.
Member Johnson?
Present.
Member Hughes?
Present.
And I did also receive an email from Member Hart that she will look at as well.
Okay. Approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Nope, we're good. Any public forum?
No one emailed and no one signed up.
I don't have any significant events to share with you.
You were in Spain.
What?
That's not for the record. I do, if it wasn't conveyed, we do have our seasonal person that has been working and is on the task of doing inspections.
Good.
Keep going.
That's it?
All the significant events I have to share at the moment.
You're up.
Did you drive around in your
Just in
coach
case you haven't
ride
forgot
your
who we are.
Well, he's fair.
That's only
He's
one.
fair.
only missed one
Okay,
meeting.
yeah, he went through my neighborhood and it was like the two worst properties within 4 or 5 blocks. And I'm like, oh, that's fair.
Okay, so I apologize to you all that I totally spaced it out last month, but I did watch the meeting and you all had an amazing discussion. It was really meaningful and I think you did a great job. So maybe if I don't come more often, that just happens, right? It happens anyway.
We needed your voice.
I have just a couple of things. Sam Watson, Chief of Police, retired today, was his retirement party. And so we'll be looking for a new Chief of Police. I think interviews have already started and I think they're down to the 3 finalists. And then there will be a couple of rounds of more interviews Thursday and Friday next week.
This week.
Also, and I just found this out today. I had no idea. Michael Vincent, the member that hasn't been here, he's been the chaplain for the police department for the last 3 years. So,
I knew he was a pastor.
So
Knew that.
I actually enjoyed my conversation with him today, and I think that's a great position for him to be in. So, and then,
I'm sorry, I didn't know we had a chaplain in the police department.
they have had,
We have 2.
you have 2 now still?
To do what?
That's a great question. So it's to help us, anybody in the police department, when they're needing guidance or direction,
Okay.
they help facilitate if there's a crisis with a particular
Okay.
member of the police department, and they'll also help reach out and see if they need assistance or if they need to set up some type of meal plans so they really are there to provide a variety of counseling and spiritual needs within the community. And each of them has different faith, but they come at it at a holistic approach to assist us within the police department. So it's a great extra asset that we have.
It's not just for employees, but it's an outreach as well?
It's pretty much just for employees. It's within the police department. So usually if there's a crisis, more for crisis, but also preventative, like there's quite a few people that seek counseling through them
Okay.
and guidance.
That makes sense.
So I think it's a very needed position, and there was one even before he started 3 years
Yes, and
ago.
he retired.
Okay.
And it's a volunteer position.
Mhm. Right. The other thing, I do know, I talked to the city attorney last week, and the city attorney is now looking for, opened it to departments if there's any changes to the municipal code, so I think you all looking at this time might be good. And then I have one other thing, on the meeting on Monday night. The one thing that really stuck out to me was one of the ordinances, council voted on first reading to bring the maximum penalties clause in line with state law, which that impacts home rule municipality, and there was some discussion about that last night, and there may be some more discussion before second reading. Second reading will be on October 7th. So that is pretty much it.
Does that make it worse penalty or lesser penalties?
So basically, what probably will happen, the state maximum penalty for different crimes is lower than our general penalty clause. Our general penalty clause on all ordinances is that the maximum fee for any crime is $2,650 and or 1 year in jail. Our current judge is a reformed judge, and so he tends to be historically more lenient than previous judges. So, I mean, I do think that the general penalty clause has been invoked sometimes, but historically maybe not as much as previous administrations. So anyway, there will be more discussion about that. So that's it.
I have a question. Do you know, or perhaps AJ or Dave, do you know if a vacancy, filling a vacancy on this committee is in process at this point by council?
It probably is not in process because we appoint twice a year. And the next time is after the first of the year, but the applications are due by the end of October or sometime in November.
They haven't released it. I think I usually see them around November, December-ish, where they call for a request for vacancies.
So we don't really have any vacancy other than the alternate, correct? Okay.
But it does leave us as a 6 rather than 7 kind of group here, so it
Okay.
makes quorums just a little bit tougher.
Okay. All right.
I'm trying to figure out why would we be at 7? Or
Five
we have
is a
7,
quorum.
right?
Right, and you have 7,
Okay,
which is similar to council. We have 7 members and 5 is a quorum.
right.
We don't have alternates either.
Well, no, but we can.
Right, you can.
Okay, sorry, I was just trying to do the math in my head and it hurt. Okay, unfinished business, I don't,
The communication subcommittee.
oh, did I skip that? Sorry.
Do you want to address that?
Yes, we just spoke with Dave, and there's been, you directed the communications.
I just reminded the communications team, because we have to they request a call for ideas.
Yes.
And I submitted through our online system that they've received just to make sure that they follow the communication plan that you guys have.
Yes, the communications plan that was already submitted to them. So other than that, that's all.
That's it. Nice, checking it right off.
I know. Unfinished business,
This was answering some questions we had during last meeting. From member Emmelhans's member's choice, the neighbor notice, the city would not allow that. Any act of a citizen acting in any sort of capacity for a city official would not be allowed whatsoever. The city attorney's office did recommend if they want to print out code from online, which is publicly available, and provide that to a neighbor or something to remind them, that's fine. But the city would not be providing any documents, anything like that for like a neighbor notice type of deal.
Okay, thank you.
For Chair Watson's, the Yard Buddies, that program has been looked at. There wasn't any traction originally with that. There's a lot more from the neighborhood services side to coordinate outside of just the Snow Buddies program. But if that's something moving into next year that this group would like to look at more, they would be willing to come in, talk about it. And that's something, depending on the staff time and the coordination that would need to be done, would be a decision that could be made later on. But if that's something that once we talked about over the winter and proposed early next year, that's something that they would be open to as well.
What would be the time frame for us to talk to them if we want to do it? I mean, because if it's before next spring, it probably would have to be like January, February timeframe, right? To get that moving or?
Yeah, and if we look at the growing season, really about June is when we start running into our first notices for the grass and weed issues, depending on the year. If it's super wet or super dry, that can vary. So they would need at least 60 days or so prior to put out applications and that type of deal to get people who are interested and start coordinating that, and people who would need assistance, who would be available for assistance. So they're asking for at least 60 days, but that doesn't include all the actual pre-planning before, if it is something even viable. So that would be something this winter, early spring, that we could look at and invite neighborhood services to come in and do a discussion about.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
AJ, would this be something that would be, the Snow Buddies is essentially a city project through the communications department. If it happened, would a Yard Buddy be the same kind of program?
Yes. Yep. And then as well, with the neighborhood engagement program, I believe Member Hughes, we talked about like a beautification best alley initiative. That's something that could be talked about. Right now, there is no funding or anything like that for awards or monetary prizes or anything like that. But that is something that if we wanted to talk about through specifically like the neighborhood groups or neighborhood leaders, that's something that they may start pushing forward. That is a program they're still trying to expand. Not all parts of the cities has sort of taken part of that neighborhood group. So it would maybe limited to those neighborhoods that are already established with neighborhood leaders. But again, that's something that neighborhood services is willing to have a discussion about, if that's something that CEAC wants to move forward. But again, it'd be probably very limited to contacts that they already have and not citywide. But they'd be open to conversation about that. That's it.
Okay. New business. Review the municipal car stations. Okay, starting with 651.
And I just want to confirm, based on our talk last week, we want to limit this to an hour, is that correct?
Yeah.
So I will timestamp it at 6:14, so we have till 7:14 to discuss unless we end earlier.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 651. Did anybody see anything involved in that where they had questions, issues, or concerns?
Dave, I have a question. Right, the last line, the aforementioned limited appointments do not permit these designated appointees to, quote, carry firearms, make arrests, exercise any other duties of law enforcement officers, except as provided herein. What other duties are excluded besides that in your head?
I think that's just a generalization.
Okay.
Like, because we do it becomes a little complicated. We actually perform non-custodial arrests, but we don't physically detain someone in handcuffs. That would be an option that we do not have. But anytime we're issuing a summons, it's considered a non-custodial. That's the technical term. But we don't carry firearms and we can't effect an arrest and we cannot take someone's custody away. There are options available to us through the police department where an arrest could be made for interference and those types of things.
I was going to say, if you encountered resistance of any kind at the if issuing of something, I would imagine that situation would be a little bit more, elevated.
We do ask for the assistance of officers when we are having interference. Or people are refusing to provide their information because they're interfering with a code official. So we will call an officer over and we will issue them a violation for interference with the code official.
Thanks.
Okay, anybody else in that section? Okay, they were very tiny. Okay, 7181. Definition. So I had a question here. We had been told that the animals were going to be called dogs and cats anymore. Is that not been reflected in here yet, or because that lists dogs and cats in here specifically? So basically, if somebody's iguana bit somebody.
Under what section?
71A1.
I know that there's these are mostly definitions that are in this portion.
Well, I know, but it says at-risk animal, any dog or cat that.
So Article C is where we got rid of the dog and cat specific, and that's animals in general.
Okay.
So there are still specific requirements towards dogs and cats, but that's also covered for Article C, which is all animals or animals in general as well.
So, but only an at-risk or dangerous animal can be a dog or cat?
In section 1 it is.
There's another section in.
No, I saw that, but I just thought it was all changed out to just animals or pets or whatever.
And that's section C, that
Okay.
includes all animals.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. Under attack, it says the unprovoked bite or infliction of bodily injury or serious bodily injury on any human or domestic animal. It doesn't reference that this is an animal bite making that attack, so it could be a human bite on a human. Is that, just because of the way the definition reads, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be charged like
I know.
that.
I understood that. It just seems odd that wouldn't at least reference the fact that this is an animal making a bite on a human rather than a human, because you could read it both ways. This is attack, the unprovoked bite or infliction of bodily injury or serious bodily on any human or domestic animal.
Okay.
It just reads kind of funny out of context where it's used later on. I'm sure it's fine, but.
Well, it's under animals. No, it isn't.
No, it isn't. This
I
is the
thought it was under
definition.
animals and fowls, but it's not, no.
It's just under definition.
Okay.
Anyway,
All right, that's a good one.
I have another question. Canine and feline breeder, any person who, outside of his regular course of employment, is breeding purebred dogs or animals. So is the person, if it's outside of his, so in other words, they're doing this part-time? Is that the way this is defined? Under canine and feline breeders, any person who outside of his regular course of employment, which implies that it's a gig. And I'm
Right.
guessing that those people are also full-time breeders. or
So if
could
it's
be.
regular course of employment, breeders, that will fall under the business licensing title for an actual
Okay, so
canine
this
or
is
feline
anybody
breeder.
outside of a
Right.
licensed breeder.
Right, so that would be their normal line of employment. And then further in the definitions, it defines like hobby breeding
Right.
versus if it's outside of hobby breeding or just, hey, neighbors' dogs got together, whatever. If it is something that they're doing more than twice a year, that is for profit, then that goes outside of the scope of the section and goes over into the licensing section.
Got it, thank you, that clarified. Okay, I
It's
got
still,
one more. Go
it's
ahead.
still
It's
confusing
still confusing to you.
because besides the employment thing, it says, is breeding purebred dogs and cats in an attempt to improve the breed through controlled propagation, thus thus achieving carefully desired qualities and traits. That automatically wouldn't be a purebred.
I think it's more just to define, a lot of these definitions also go hand in hand with state ordinances. With specifically with animal, we're trying to mirror a lot of the state statutes when it comes to like oversight with PACFA, zoning, as well as licensing.
Just says it's, though you're breeding purebreds to achieve desired great. If they're purebreds, you're not doing that. It's two separate. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, next.
For me, it just, at large, I wondered why that wasn't in the definitions. Is it pretty straightforward then, I guess?
Yeah, and it says specifically in the running at large, which is the next section after definitions.
This is like off leash in parentheses.
Yeah.
I guess that's not really up for too much dispute then.
And that section is actually, was revised by council within the last 2 years.
Go ahead, Rick.
One more question, and under dangerous animal, any dog or cat that, it references the manner of a reasonable person. What's a reasonable person?
That's just that's a standard that's utilized for all legal jargon. Like that is what would a reasonable person define something? So
I feel like I'm immune to this.
that's something that's actually a court standard. So it's not something that I can prove. It would be something that
Okay,
would be proven in a court of law.
that seems like such a subjective phrase.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's used throughout, since the beginning of the United States.
I could bring my wife in as a character. witness.
Reasonable search and seizure
Yeah.
kind of lines, things like that.
It goes along the lines of the whole due process, that code enforcement doesn't determine if a dog is dangerous. That is done through the court process. So if they choose to have a jury trial for a dangerous dog charge, then that would be their right through the due process. And that would be the jury to determine what was reasonable or not. If they choose to have a bench hearing or a bench trial just with the judge would determine what's reasonable or not. So you'll see that in several of them, including like barking dog. Once we get into the foul section, what's reasonable is based on the due process, and that's either up to the defendant to have the choice of a bench trial or to have a jury trial. And that's what determines the reasonableness.
Thank you.
Anybody else in 71A1?
Well, let's go on to the next page.
Yeah, that's still.
Okay, that's A1
Yeah,
still, right?
still, yep.
Domesticated animals, dog or cat, we won't go into that because I know that changed a little bit. Or any other animal kept as a household pet or as livestock. Is that lizards, snakes, and are they considered domesticated?
It's anything that we would typically see within the standard pet trade industry is
Okay.
what we're utilizing. So it's not an
Potbelly pigs.
alligator. Potbelly pig is actually considered livestock, and
I was
later
wondering
it's
about
outright prohibited in the city of Inglewood.
Okay, thank you.
And this may have been before you came, they talked about potbelly pigs for a long time, right?
It was before I started, kind of into when I started, and the determination was made that it's livestock and all because they look really cute and small, but they get really big, and so they're considered livestock and outright prohibited.
How about miniature horses, which have become the trendy thing now?
They are considered livestock and are outright prohibited.
Okay.
The only thing that is not considered livestock would be fowl. City of Inglewood.
Chickens, right?
Because you can utilize them primarily for food, feathers, eggs, meat. And that is the exception to the code, and that was reviewed by CEAC for
Forever
like
too.
3 years.
Were you on when you were
Yes.
doing that? What about ducks? I mean,
It's considered fowl, so they're permitted.
okay.
Fowl,
Turkeys, any birds, so like guinea hens.
so they're not
quail.
considered livestock.
They're
Just
not
like
because you can
oysters.
utilize them.
They're not considered pets either. They're
No.
just considered fowl.
Fowl
Okay,
under this ordinance.
got it.
no roosters.
Right.
No, basically, so you can have roosters. They're not outright prohibited. We can get to that later. There's definitions that prohibit certain behaviors.
More of a noise issue, right? Yeah.
What about peacocks?
You can have a peacock as long as it's not wandering off your property and isn't making the noise.
And what about ostrich, same thing?
So that gets into more of like the state definition and that's more of a livestock matter there than fowl.
Because you can eat their eggs, so.
Yes, you can. We've talked about
Yeah,
that scenario.
where would you get ostrich food? I don't know. Okay. Where was it? Okay. Anything else in 7-1A1? I think we're going pretty generic. All right, 7-1A2, at-risk or dangerous behaviors prohibited. Okay, 7-1A3, running at large.
I was not aware that cats were part of that. The number of cats I see running around neighborhoods, that's basically illegal.
It is, and that's something that we've had a contention with. We always would prefer that cats remain inside. There's some people that have the philosophy that they have cats inside and outside. Cats live longer if they're strictly inside. We have a very difficult time enforcing that because one, we don't know always where the cat lives. Nobody wants to be a witness, and we will pick up cats. We do have some feral cat populations that are within the city of Inglewood that some community members with professional organizations have trapped, have neutered, and have vaccinated so they don't continue to perpetuate. But relocating those types of cats is tremendously dangerous to them and doesn't end up well for the cats being rehomed. So we try, it is the standard, the industry standard with feral cat populations to have the trap, neuter, vaccinate, and then release back into that community so that they can continue. And they do have very short lifespans, unfortunately.
Bunch where I live. It doesn't bother me. My dog kind of likes it. Gives him something to do.
I guess it's obvious, but at large means outside of the property of the owner.
Correct.
And obviously they can run around the property.
Correct.
Okay.
I didn't know the cat thing either. Okay, any more on 1A3? Okay, any questions on 1A4, 7-1A4? Tethering.
I just wanted to understand more about number 4. Animals classified as at risk or dangerous shall not be tethered at any time. Just wanted to understand a little bit more about what that means.
It's
Why?
more of, we require several things as part of the dangerous dog permit process. It's to not be able to have control over your animal and watch over them and leave them free. Most of the tethering has been done with properties that technically don't have fences or fences that are too short where animals can't get over them. This is kind of a contention right now in the animal welfare industry where the state is actually looking at prohibiting tethering altogether. That's something that we're advocating for at the state level. And I don't know how that would impact here. I know that we would need to probably revisit this if this is something that we would want to continue. This goes back to the 80s when it was acceptable and we didn't know the psychological damage or concerns that we had related to animals that are being tethered. And so this might be something that this body may want to look at industry standards and what the animal welfare industry may be saying about tethering animals in the future. This is one that we've identified that potentially we need to have a conversation about.
If it's not allowed, what's the conversation that needs to be had?
So if the state outright prohibits it, we would need to make a change within ordinance because of the home rule situation. That would be the concern that I have. but this body could
Are
outright.
you talking about any pet, not just at risk or dangerous?
Correct.
Okay, that's where I lost it, okay.
If it's an at-risk or dangerous pet on the property can't be tethered just anywhere.
No.
Do a lot of people still do that?
We have a few people that do utilize this as a tool. Where we come into the concern is we've had a few where they've kept them on tethers 24 hours a day. So those are the cases that we've investigated. We have received complaints and we do try to monitor the tethering aspect. But we aren't getting that complaint as much anymore. I think people have realized the standard of care for pets has changed from the 70s and 80s to where we are currently, and the state is also evaluating how we handle those pets.
Does enforcing this fall into where it has to be visible reasonably from the road like you would with other?
So yes and no. I will let you know, we are agents of the state, Department of Agriculture, and we do have the authority under state statute to go onto a property to investigate to make sure that the animal has adequate food, water, and housing. So any results of that inspection could potentially result in charges. If we can't see it from the public right away and we don't know that there's a dog there, we can't just go on someone's property. There's got to be somebody that comes forward and says, I see this dog, I hear the dog in distress. There's mitigating factors. We're not just going to walk onto somebody's property.
You can, if the neighbor calls, you could, and they could say, we can see it from our window, you could go in their house and see.
If they invite us,
Right.
I can't, yeah.
Right.
I'm not going to say, hey, can I come up to your
No.
second story window?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, yeah. Okay. All right, any more for 1A4? All right, 1A5.
My only question on that one had to do with impoundment. Where are animals impounded and what's the decision on that facility? How's that facility evaluated for use?
It goes back many years, and I don't know if Councilmember Russell was a part of that conversation. So the city of Inglewood, along with several other jurisdictions, contributed funding for a shelter to be built. As part of that, we entered into a contracted agreement with the Humane Society of the South Platte Valley. There are only a couple shelters that are in close vicinity. The two that are within relative driving facilities would be the Humane Society of the South Platte Valley, or Foothills would be the next closest, then Castle Rock. So because this facility was specifically designed at the direction of Inglewood, Greenwood Village, Cherry Hills, there's a bunch of jurisdictions that utilize this facility. And as a result, we have very low cost expenses that we pay to the shelter on an annual basis for housing, rehoming, locating owners. They're a great resource. We try to get this out all the time. Low cost vaccination, spay, neuter. You can't even get vaccinations anymore for your pets. We're under $100 going to the vet, but they offer them for $25 plus low cost microchipping for like $15. So they are a huge resource for the community, especially those that are on fixed income or don't have that's one of the barriers that we have right now regarding pet ownership is access to adequate veterinary care at a reasonable cost.
Is there a daily fee for impoundment? Is that how that's structured?
There is. The expense depends on the type of animal that comes in. If it's a dangerous animal, it requires more management, so it is a $25 a day fee. But most people that come in, it's $12 a day, depending on the type of animal that's in there.
Thanks.
And that's set by contract.
Do you guys have chip readers?
We do. We don't usually utilize those. We will out in the field for emergency situations. We try not to do it out in the field because it takes a lot of time. If you've ever tried to do a locate on an animal, it takes a considerable amount of time. We don't have the staff time to necessarily locate an animal that may be running at large. So when we take them to the shelters, it's scanned and then they take on let's try and find the owner. Most of the time, I would say, a considerable amount of time. The chip stuff isn't updated online, so we're big advocates of updating that, but they are the ones that are able to take the time and the energy as part of our contract to look at numbers. Outside of a caller. If they have a caller in it, we will call the owner and let them know where they can, if they're close by, or how we can arrange for reunification. And if the animal comes in on the same day and the owner picks it up, there usually is a fee associated with that reunification. I do want to point out, because you did ask the fee, does anybody here board their animals?
Does anyone what?
Board their animals or have boarded their animals?
I have in the past.
It's pretty expensive. So $25 a day is over a third of what you would pay for boarding an animal. It could be anywhere from $50 to $150 per day to board your animal.
Okay, any more on 1A5? Okay, 1A6, number of animals maintained on premises.
So you can only have 3 dogs or 3 cats or a mixture of
It says and. 3 dogs.
But no more
3
than 4.
dogs and 3 cats.
But no more than 4 total.
3 dogs, 1 cat, 1 dog, 3. Yeah.
Right. So no more than 4 animals.
Is that
Okay.
valid for chickens too?
No. This specifically says dogs.
Is there a limit on how many chickens people can have?
No.
No?
The only regulation is once you start either producing eggs or reach the agricultural limits, then you're bound by state law.
I see, okay.
And what is that?
A lot higher than any of our properties should ever be able to handle. I think, if I remember right, we're talking like 20 dozen eggs a day production,
Oh,
or
wow, so it would
high
be
production.
at least 100.
That's a lot of birds.
That's a lot of poop.
We've only
A lot of
had
bird food,
one
yeah.
property come close, pretty close to that number.
And it was very well maintained, and
No, I've had neighbors with very large properties and there's lots of room and lots of animals and
We just look at the impact of, is the noise creating any concerns? Not from us, but are the neighbors just complaining about noise? Are they complaining about odor? Are they also able to care for the animal properly? Are they able to keep it clean properly? Making sure there aren't rodents, or, that they're cleaning up after them within a reasonable amount of time. Those are the things that would contribute. And if you have one person caring for 75 birds, it becomes very overwhelming.
If a unit were a duplex and it shared a common backyard, is it conceivable that you could have 8 animals out there at any one time?
Yes. Have we had that? Yes.
I started thinking about the combinations there, and especially with, slaughter homes, all this kind of stuff coming down at multiple units and things like that, and how many animals that could actually create within a given building, for instance.
And that is something that we've done through the court, and the court's actually given the direction on it, and it's based on address and unit number. So if you have a 4-plex, each one of them are held because it's a different unit number, a different address to these standards. Same thing with an apartment building. If it was just based on address, well, the entire building could only have 4 animals. No, that's not fair. So as long as it's the same address, different unit, but if it's the same address, no unit, which we do run into sometimes, that's where it would have to look at the circumstance based. And our court has ruled in the past that if it's one address, but it's multiple rentals or multiple families out of one address, they're limited by the code to the 4 animals. But if it's 2 units and upstairs and downstairs, each one of them is held to the code. So.
If you're in an apartment building or a condo and you have a restriction of 2 animals per unit, and the code for the city of Englewood says up to 4 combination, would one override the other?
That's very easy to answer. That's a civil matter, that a contract that you have entered into with that complex or the homeowners association or the apartment complex. We do not enforce that. That would have to be a civil remedy between the apartment or the condo owner and the organization that manages that. It's the same with an apartment building. We would not get involved if they say you can only have one pet. We can't get involved with that. That's a civil contract issue between renter and owner. That's a great question.
If an excessive number of animals is found in a residence and it's a rented residence, who's ultimately liable for that?
In our code, it always outlines owner occupant, so they are held equally responsible. And we have issued violations to not only the occupant, but also in conjunction with the owner to make sure we get compliance.
I want to go back to poultry. So.
Do you want to wait till we get to the poultry
Oh,
section?
sure, of course.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Okay, next is 7-1A7, rabies vaccination required. Is there any question on that? Just seems-
I have a question, but it's not really a question about it because it answered in a couple pages here regarding tags. Is there a reason that rabies tags are not indicated in this section also?
No.
Okay, I just didn't know. I put the question there and then 2 pages later I found the answer, but the fact that it wasn't referenced in there was a little surprising.
All right, 7-1A8, poisoning dogs or cats. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. All right,
Do we enforce that?
We do. It also goes hand in hand with cruelty and neglect. So it's not just that charge, there's also an enhancement with the cruelty and neglect portion.
I mean, the reason I'm asking that is years ago, the neighbors behind us put some stuff out for the dog to get, and I don't know whether it was poisoned or not, but it annoyed me. I mean, I picked it up and threw it away, so what if there's a problem between neighbors? It may not be the owner of the pet.
It may not be, but it's unlawful. Nobody can poison a dog or a cat. So we've had investigations in the past of other jurisdictions where neighbors don't get along and they don't like the dog and they've thrown poisoned meatballs or rat infested meatballs over. And we have had cases like that, and those are investigated and enforced.
Okay.
And then what
It
happens?
actually probably would not be charging it municipally, just so you know. Those are cases that are clearly and intentionally, and so we would charge those at a higher level at the county, at the district court, and they can be arrested for that. So those types of cases are very blatant and intentional, and so we would utilize criminal aspects over municipal aspects for those.
And 20 years ago, we had somebody throwing antifreeze meat into random people's backyards. And that was a problem. So I can see.
Hopefully we don't have those. We haven't had them for a while.
We
so I'm
haven't, but that was
hoping
20 years ago. But
we-
it's happened
we
in
don't
Florida.
have that anytime.
Right.
And we'll get the occasional report of that. A lot of the times it does come down to the vets. Those people do take their dogs or cats to the vet. They get their blood work tested. This is what comes back. They're able to provide whatever substance they found to their vet. The challenge we run into is we can't submit that to the state. We could get the results back in 2 to 3 years if we're lucky. Sometimes they won't even test it. But that's where a lot of times we do have to work with the owners to work with the vet to get that tested, which a lot of vets can do it in office now, where they can actually do that type of testing if there is a chemical agent or a poison found. And that's where we have charged in the past.
okay, 7-1A9, cruelty to or neglect of domesticated animals.
I have another one of those word terms. What does adequate mean?
Adequate is the term that is used to describe what would be best practice. And so we don't establish best practices. That's usually done by the American Veterinary Society, Colorado Veterinary Society. PACFA is the biggest oversight of how animals should be housed. And so they have very specific requirements for each.
If let's say, for instance, an animal were obese, and would obesity be considered inadequate?
It depends on the circumstance. We did have an animal, it's been a few years, we had concerns about. Our job is not to charge that. Our job is to try and educate, and the dog didn't have professional medical assistance, so we made sure that we were able to get them into a vet and that they had adequate nutrition. And if you've ever read the back of a dog food bag, it tells you how much you're supposed to feed your dog, but they're trying to sell more pet food. It doesn't really align with how much that dog might need. So you always seek guidance from your professional as to how much you're going to feed a Chihuahua versus a Great Dane.
Has there ever been a way to, I guess, quantify B? That seems difficult to enforce, I would think.
It's not. This comes along where I've seen this most recently is where neighbors aren't getting along, and so one neighbor's claiming that their dog is barking excessively, but the neighbor has video of the other neighbor taunting and harassing the dog by spraying water on it, or kicking at the fence line, or charging at the fence line. So that would be an example of that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't want to jump in front of it.
No, go ahead.
Number 5, if a domesticated animal is housed outdoors in addition to a shelter, it shall be provided with an enclosure to minimize risk or injury. Is that like, I'm assuming an enclosure would be like a dog run?
It could be a dog run, but we also want to make sure if you're providing an enclosure, you're not putting, again, a large-sized animal in too small of a cage where it would cause injury to the animal.
Also, for example, like we've all seen like the igloo dog houses and that, those outside in winter do a great job. Depending how you face them, they keep the wind out, they can keep the snow out. In the sun, if they're in the middle of a field or no tree, it's no different than your car, they turn into a sauna. That would not be considered adequate shelter at that point. Now, that same igloo dog house under a tarp or under some sort of shelter, that may be considered adequate at that point.
Thank you.
Anything else in way 9? 71810, removal of excrement damage to shrubbery or plants.
Yeah, how is that enforced?
So we're not sitting on someone's lawn watching. So we do have to have somebody come forward being willing to testify in court that this dog of their neighbor has been pooping in their front yard every day. They've taken pictures. So the burden really falls on the victim of that. The other circumstance would be if we get a complaint, which we do from time to time, where a neighbor, I mean, you can clearly see it, hasn't picked up their dog poop in like a year in their backyard.
Oh, God.
So there's ways of enforcing it, but we're not out genetically testing. Like apartment complexes, some of them require genetic testing of the poop, and if they find the poop, they send it off to the genetic testing, and they find out what dog it is, and then they send you a letter. That's all civil within apartment complexes, but so that really relies on one, if the citizen's complaining, we can see it. 2, that we have a witness that's coming forward that's willing to testify. Again, we're not jumping automatically to, unless it's cruelty and neglect, that's really obvious and very torturous and harmful to the animal. Our first course of action is to provide education. So we always will leave a notice saying, hey, you need to remember to pick up your dog poop. If they don't do it, then we've already been out there. They haven't remedied it within the time frame that we've put on the notice. We'll issue them a summons in the court.
So it's really 3 days. I mean, you have 3 days to get your poop picked up.
I didn't see anything about like on your own property though, or did I miss that?
This could also, it's not just your own property. You could have your neighbor dog pooping on your.
Yeah, that makes sense, but on your own property, do you have to?
Yes, you do within 72 hours.
Okay. Oh, that's the last part, okay.
Property, your own property is every 72 hours, property of another or city property is immediate.
Immediately, got it.
Like damaging plants and shrubs, does that include peeing on them?
That's,
I asked.
someone would again have to come forward and they would have to be able to prove that they were injured or their bush was damaged because of urine. That's not, I would need extra information, like an arborist to come out and be like, yeah, this plant was affected because of the urine. Like, we need more information. Where we're really talking about damage to
Okay.
stuff.
I just ask you because my dog kills plants. Okay, so you can give me a ticket.
Okay, is it killing your plants?
It's killing our plants in our backyard. It's very upsetting.
You can give the dog something to
I was gonna say, there's some,
neutralize the acidity in the urine, you know that,
there's some
right?
stuff you can get that changes their pH, but that's your property, you can do what you
Do whatever you want, kill your plants.
I don't want to. It just does. Okay. Any more questions on that one? All right, 7-1A11, proof of current rabies vaccination required for dogs and cats.
I have a question on C.
I knew you guys were gonna ask about that. That's one area that may need to just have or provide proof, because a lot of people are not putting those on their collars, or they're having a different kind of tag or a barcode put on their tags. I know it used to drive me crazy when I had a bigger dog, when I had all those tags on it,
All
and it was
those
jingle
tags.
jangling all around. We allow, again, maybe it needs to be quantified in here, we do allow them to provide a digital proof of rabies.
Our dogs are always either on a leash or in our house.
Yeah.
But we don't do the tags on them
No.
anymore.
No.
for
Like,
that
we could be
reason.
down at the dog park and most people don't have their tags on, but if we're asking people to provide a proof electronically that they're up to date, and most, they still issue tags, but a lot of veterinarians are kind of going away and doing the digital aspect for vaccinations. You can also sometimes link the vaccination to the microchip. There's a lot of microchip places that do allow you to link that record or upload that record so that you can view it as well.
So this could be something that could be updated with more current technological information on how to track that.
Correct.
Well, if it's in the chip information, how do you get it if you don't have a chip?
We would go to the shelters to look up that information because they have a different access for shelters and law enforcement to look up microchip and the status that goes along with that.
I remember it's probably been 2 or 3 years ago, I was talking to somebody about some vets actually test, and so dogs, some dogs wouldn't necessarily have to be vaccinated every year because of, and I don't remember what it was now, but
They could test for the antibodies of the.
yeah, the
I
antibodies.
remember you asking this
Yes.
question a few years ago.
Yes,
And so I posed it back to the Colorado Veterinary Association, and they said that that is not an industry standard, that is not something that the veterinary community would recommend. It's from a holistic side. There's some holistic veterinarians that might offer that. However, that's not in line with state or municipal. And the vaccinations, you can either get a 1 year or a 3 year. But just like with humans, I'm vaccinated against rabies. I do have my titers checked, but I do also need boosters to maintain my immunity to rabies.
well, and they said too, was it the titers they were doing to base that on, I remember, and it was a holistic.
Yeah, so because it needs to be administered specifically by a veterinarian, and statute does outline very clearly as to how rabies vaccinations need to be administered, the Colorado Veterinary Association does not recommend, and they were very adamant and very, very stern as to why would you not prevent rabies, because if your animal is bitten, what would happen if their rabies vaccination was lapsed is not something I'd want to put any kind of owner through.
So even for the dog itself, right? I mean, if the dog is, generally, it's other animals that transmit rabies.
The concern that the state has, and the health department has, is we have had domestic animals that have had rabies. So cats, dogs, llamas, cows. We are very concerned, especially about our pet population and how they interact with humans and other animals. We did not, but Sheridan had puppies that were adopted out to multiple families that had rabies. And so now all these humans,
Were they born with rabies?
we don't know how it was transmitted, but you might have seen it on the news, and I had to correct one news source because they were saying Inglewood. It's an Inglewood mailing address, but they're not in Inglewood. And so I think it was 5 families that had these puppies, and they all had to go through a very tremendous traumatic experience of having to relinquish the puppies to the state and what happens with that and all the vaccinations and stuff and the medical expenses that are incurred.
You mean the people vaccinations?
People, yes.
Those are terrible.
So we're really trying to avoid that aspect, and the Colorado Veterinary Association as well as the National Veterinary Association is very clear about the standardization of the vaccinations for domestic pets.
Rob, can I ask, so our general goal of going through this is to educate ourselves, of course.
Well, and to see if there's anything that we can recommend to change as well, any wording or anything like that.
And that's where I was going, is it seems like there might be something right there that, I know you're already aware of it.
Yeah, I
but-
think, and again, you will need to propose what things that you see you might want to change. We're not taking notes on the changes at this time. This is something that if you want to go back through and be like, hey, this is a pretty easy fix, we can send it to the city attorney to update that one section to reflect current types of things. But that's something that this group would need to put together.
Well,
So I was
is
thinking,
there-
should we flag certain things now, or what's the best approach for us to make sure we?
Yeah, I would flag it now. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you see to change in here right now?
I think we were talking about bringing that code on identification more up to date with the different ways, as we were saying with chips and different, more modern language around how that can be done, rather than only on the collar.
Dave, I would defer to you and AJ, as far as, if you perceive this as something which would help things, put the wording together, or do you just, what's your?
We could make a change, but honestly, I don't think, it does say they have to have their tags. Is that something that we're enforcing? No, because there's other ways of providing proof of rabies.
So do we
And
just,
even if somebody does have a tag and if they're involved in a bite, we still require a veterinarian documentation to prove that the animal has been vaccinated.
That's all you have to show is that proof of
We
vaccination.
really just need to have proof of current vaccinations.
And this isn't like, well, this is kind of like a seatbelt law, in that you don't get pulled over necessarily unless you have another violation, you're sitting there without a seatbelt on. So you're not gonna seek out dogs.
I wouldn't say that because our park rules outright prohibit any animals from being unvaccinated within our parks. And so that would be
Okay.
something that we would,
But you don't seek that out.
we don't seek out.
That's what I'm referring to.
No, we're not going and being like, oh, you don't have the rabies tag on, we're gonna give you a ticket. No,
Okay,
no, we haven't written that.
Unless there's something else.
Unless there's something else, but again, if you don't have proof of rabies, that's a different charge. We're not gonna put no tag on your collar and no proof of rabies, we're just gonna charge no proof of rabies.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So it seems kind of like a low priority update. I don't know if it's worth noting that for this
yeah.
committee, and then,
Well, I was thinking we could identify or define tag, but we can't because we say collar with tag. Because if we could just define tag as proof of the
you
vaccination.
should say proof that they may show proof of, they will have to show proof of rabies vaccination.
it probably doesn't make sense to dig into it now, more of just something to
Yeah.
come back
If you
to.
guys wanna flag that, and that's something that, if
Yeah.
there's a few things you could include in one memo that you would like to update the
Yeah.
following codes, that might be the easiest way to do that.
For another time, another topic.
No, that's good.
I
Thanks.
could see this review getting bogged down, and,
Yeah.
we've
No.
had verbiage issues before you came on. and it's not pretty.
I think,
Oh my
put a
gosh.
pin in it, we can revisit
Well,
later.
I don't think anybody was actually here when we went through the,
Just as,
No.
no,
just with you.
I know
Yeah.
Rita
The
was.
may
Well,
and
you
shall
were.
thing is what I'm. referring
Yes.
to.
Oh, that's what,
The
oh
may
my
and shall
gosh,
thing, so.
yeah.
What?
The may and shall thing.
No,
Mhm.
well, yeah. I think it was,
15 minutes left.
oh, all right. Is any more on 11? 1A11, okay. 7-1A12, records and reports.
And just so you know, the designee is the Humane Society of the South Platte Valley.
The Humane Society is the designee. But that's not something we would need to.
No, you don't need to do anything with that.
All right, 7-1A13, guard or attack dogs.
I just wondered, what does it cost, the license?
I don't know that one off.
And do we have many?
We do,
We do?
just a few.
I don't want.
Mostly up in the industrial area.
Really? for protection of,
I know there's an auto place up there that has one. At least I hope they have a permit. They have the guard dogs. They're actually good dogs.
Sorry, I'm bringing up the fees
No,
and
no,
rates
you're
for-
fine. I was waiting.
For us.
We were just sitting here waiting on you.
My computer's just spinning.
Just have to find it. Hold on.
Is there internet in here?
There is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase
That
that.
reminds me.
Is there publicly accessible internet? Okay.
We'll probably have to help the code.
Sorry. It's being very slow.
Come back to it.
Computer's faster.
yeah, it's
Well,
not
while
that
he's looking,
important.
were there any other questions or?
No, I didn't
She's
have
on
any
that?
other than what the cost was,
It is $250 a year.
$250 a year.
250?
Yes.
I have a question, maybe I missed it, is there a limit on number of guard or attack dogs in a premise? Or is it bound by the other?
It would be
Or-
bound by the other, but we
Great.
do not have a limitation on this, in this specific section. So they would be limited to 3.
To 3, okay.
Or 3 dogs and a cat.
Attack.
Some of those
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Just
Have you seen some of those TikToks?
And
What happens when you don't declaw them?
And the clarification on that is that they're not allowed more than 3 dogs on the property at a time. All of the ones that are permitted are reputable, they are larger companies that do have it, and they will actually pick up the dogs in the morning, they'll bring new dogs in the afternoon. It's a rotation, but they'll never exceed the 3. So sometimes the dogs aren't there during business hours, some businesses do have them during business hours, but they're in a separate area. But that's all regulated and inspected upon the issue of the permit.
It mentions here about a suitable chain when you take a dog out of their enclosed area. Does that have to be a chain or is it gonna be some other kind of, chain seems so defined in terms of what you need?
It can be whatever is necessary to control that specific animal. So there's a lot of other items that they can use.
And the signage, is that almost like a state law that it has to be red letters on a white background with a black frame and the whole, that's state law? Okay.
Anyone else? No? Okay. 7-1A14, barking dogs harboring prohibited. Barking dogs harboring prohibited. That doesn't exactly roll off the tongue.
I'm sorry, what's the difference between keeping and harboring?
Same
It's
thing,
the same.
Okay.
keep or harbor, whatever.
Harbor doesn't have to be yours, does it?
No, it doesn't. So like, we use that also for dangerous dog, like you can't harbor a dangerous dog. So let's say, we know this dangerous dog lives at this house. They're trying to keep us from finding that dog, which has happened, and
Right.
now lives at this house. Well, now they're harboring the dangerous dog.
Okay, nothing there? All right. 7-1A15, police dogs.
And I will note that this has been updated also from the state statute, so this would be specifically charged now at the state level, which has a more serious penalty.
I was gonna say, shouldn't this be a felony, basically?
It was not until this last year, and this is something that the code enforcement team here advocated for at the state level.
Oh, good.
So, because we do have a service animal that is working.
Should be a felony. Okay, nothing there for anybody? Okay, 71A16, dangerous animals prohibited. Really, I would have thought everybody would.
And I do want to let you know that this was something that has been reviewed a few times by this particular body and updated by council. We are very happy with our dangerous dog ordinances and the way that they are applied and how we utilize them.
Okay. So stay away is what you're saying.
Yeah,
I don't want to say stay away, but I will say that this group has reviewed it a few times and
Yes, we have.
ours has been used as a model for other organizations throughout the state.
All right, 71A17, instruction period.
Any questions?
Okay. All right, 71C1, definitions. And I think this is where was this going to be where the foul part was?
Yes.
Okay,
I didn't see anything, I had questions.
but you had questions on foul.
Yes. I wanted to know what the rules on roosters, because I know Denver doesn't allow roosters. But-
So that was a municipal ordinance that they had passed specifically limiting the number of fowls that could be on a property and outright prohibiting roosters just because it caused too many problems. We don't have that prohibition anymore.
Okay,
So we go off of,
so it's like
Right.
barking dogs, like if it wakes up all your neighbors, or if it gets territorial around the fence line and is threatening towards the other neighbors, then it's more of an issue.
And if you look at 71C6B, that's where the disturbance of neighborhood would come in specifically for roosters.
Okay.
And that's what we've actually charged in the past.
We have a rooster, people at one of the yards behind us, and that thing goes off at 5 o'clock every day.
is it disturbing your peace? Do
It's
we
5
need to talk
p.m.
about
It's
it?
waking them up.
It goes off at 5 p.m. every day.
Oh, 5 p.m.
That's not so bad.
what's wrong with him?
It's the dumbest rooster.
They usually, I grew up on a poultry farm, so they will usually crow in the morning and before they roost at night. It's kind of like
He's only at night.
we're all going to bed now, come get in the trees and let's go.
I have been up all hours of the day, never heard it in the morning. It's only at 5 o'clock. They have that thing trained perfect. I love that thing. I tell people, listen, it's 5 o'clock. Okay. Any other questions in the definitions?
Yeah, well, where were we here? No,
No?
under prohibitive acts.
Oh, we're not there yet.
Okay.
Okay. 71C2, premises clean or kept clean.
I have a question about removal of manure, my other hat of being on the sustainability committee. If manure were used in a rehabilitative way, is that acceptable?
As long as it doesn't cause a nuisance through smell or odor or nuisance animals, it is completely okay.
Is nuisance with like smell, odor, noise subjective?
Again, it would not fall to us to make that determination, and we would use a reasonable standard. But if a neighbor comes forward and says, you know, on behalf, their composting is too close to my bedroom window and it's really causing a smell, we ask the person to move it and they don't, then if they want to write a statement and be willing to testify how it's causing a nuisance, then we would move forward with summons to court, and they would be able to, they would have to remedy that through the
Yeah.
court system.
So for example, like a nuisance would be reasonable. We actually had a landscape company a couple of years ago get in a shipment of very green compost. That was too hot and really unusable because of, it was during the spring, it was still cold, it was steaming, and the odor and that it was producing was creating a neighborhood nuisance. At that point, we did get involved, contact the landscaping company who admitted, this isn't what we wanted, we're trying to leave it on the property to mature. They ended up having to haul it away and get more mature compost because it was creating a nuisance at that point. So that's the standards that we sort of.
Mature food.
No, it's true,
No, I know. Just
like
sounds-
cows, horses, it takes them 6 months. Chicken poop is almost like just as soon as it's dry, just within a few days to a week. It's completely different.
You do
Somebody knows their poop.
Nice
Yes,
say,
you-
she's going to be a scatologist.
You do want, you do want your poop dry.
Well, aged appropriately.
Aged
And aged
Yeah,
appropriately, yes,
that
that's true.
nitrogen can be nasty.
So Rick, what'd you talk about at CEAC tonight? Agents.
I could bring my compost
Fertilizer.
box in.
All right, I think we're done there. 713C, or 71C3, zoological permits. Anyone?
How, is the city, does the city supervise itself at the farm at the?
So if
Bellevue Park?
you, a bona fide publicly or privately owned zoological park, this isn't something, that is an educational, for educational purposes, for that we do not require a permit. The ordinance doesn't require it.
But it's, I'm assuming someone supervises those animals
Oh,
and makes
yeah.
sure that they're
Oh, yeah.
safe.
Those
it's
animals
clean.
are
Or nice.
very well looked after. They even leave and go to pastures during off times. Like, so the animals are very well taken care of. We have had some concerns from activists that have come in and filed false complaints about some of the animals. Not
Jeez,
kidding.
Really?
We still investigate it, we look at it. We have not found any animal cruelty, neglect.
I would
They're
assume not,
treated
but-
beyond reasonable for those particular animals.
No.
Does the city own those animals or do we rent them from some farmer? Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that. I think they might be provided. I have never asked the ownership, but that is a good question. The city isn't in the business of owning animals other than the service animals. So I would say that it's a relationship we have.
Right, because they go home to somebody else for most of the year.
Yeah, right, you would think.
They are very domestic. I'll say that. All right. 71C4, specific livestock prohibited.
I know this sounds really strange. I'm just gonna educate you all on this. We actually have people who have called us and said, my dog died, I'm putting it outside for you to come pick up.
My what?
Their dog died.
What?
Oh,
Yeah. So, or they're just throwing it in. There's some people that treat animals very differently or have a different mindset. So we have this for a particular reason.
And code enforcement has no problem going, especially for larger animals. With some of our population that may not be physically able to load them in vehicles or that, we have no problem going and assisting. And so they can transport them to their vet for cremation or proper
Yeah.
disposal. We'll absolutely assist in that method, but it is
Sure.
up to the owner to dispose of that animal.
sure.
In their expense. I've made a few exceptions for a few people that we know. There were some mental health concerns and other concerns related to them where we've taken on that burden, but that is very, very sad. And it's in the best interest of the community that anything.
And I will say, if you do find any seriously injured pets, that VRCC will take them. We've had them do that for us before.
And they are moving.
Oh, they are?
Out of Inglewood?
Really?
I didn't
Just
think the whole
down at
building.
River Point and 285. They're building a whole new facility. Some of their operations already moved.
Oh, River Point? Oh, that's,
So
okay. That's,
But they're building a whole complex with all their facilities in one building. And I believe within the next year, they're gonna vacate everything here in England.
Oh, no.
We don't really get a lot of revenue from it, so.
No, but it's for pet owners, we've used their emergency services.
Yeah, they're gonna be very close. They've just outgrown their facilities and their specialties. They also are limited by what kind of equipment they can have. Some of their stuff's a little outdated, so they're really wanting to modernize.
But they're charging.
Just like any other emergency room, they really want to provide high quality emergency trauma services to their animals.
And they do.
They're not going very far.
No, and that's what, yeah, I was worried they were like going to Denver.
And there's other, I will tell you, there's additional emergency veterinarians that are close by as well, that are 24 hours that also provide the same services. So we don't always utilize VRCC. They're not the most economical for the city, but we do have contracted facilities through the shelter that we utilize for emergency services. Excuse me.
In terms of disposition of a squirrel, squirrel dies on my property. Do I throw him out in the street and make sure that he gets picked up by the city? No, I'm kidding. But
We do provide guidance. People can just,
because you don't put it in the trash.
you
and
can.
You
There is
can.
no prohibition, and actually that's what we recommend, that you double bag it.
Is that
Just Put
right?
it in your regular trash.
Okay.
Yeah.
We had one with a broken neck in our yard. We took it to VRCC and they euthanized it. For free.
We'll come out and take care of it too.
They-
if we really-
Yeah, but I didn't want like somebody to, my kid was still living at the house.
Oh, that makes
I didn't
sense.
want a shovel through the head. So we took it to VRCC and
That was
they,
kind
for,
of you.
for free, they euthanized it. It was very nice. Or it was very nice of them. It was very nice.
And it's fine just to take it to the park trash.
I won't say anything regarding that. We would prefer that you do it in your own receptacle or know somebody with a receptacle, but I wouldn't recommend taking it to the park.
We have a few buried in our yard.
You seen Pet Cemetery?
I know. When my kids were younger, but they wanted to do that.
Sure.
No, I have goldfish and stuff buried in my yard.
We are in time, but if we want to finish the last section, I think.
Yeah, I think somebody had a, okay. So,
Motion that we continue.
So we just did 1C5, 71C6, prohibited acts and conditions. Was that where you were?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's interesting on the indecent exhibition of animals. To even have that in there.
Well,
This goes back to some Wild West Day type things.
Does it?
Yeah, so that's why it's in there. We actually did have someone who had an event that felt that it was appropriate to have horses brought in without contacting the city. So we have this for a particular reason.
I mean, horses brought in on public display? Oh,
And depending on the situation behind it, there are some state laws that prohibit certain activities as well. So some of this mimics part of state law.
okay.
anything else there?
If a religious organization had it as part of their rituals to do something with an animal,
Still got
how
to.
does that combat this? I mean, it's a weird hypothetical, but,
Is it?
To do specifically with.
I don't know, utilize an animal in some specific way that would be viewed by anybody else as cruel except for that particular religious group.
Agree.
We'd have to do a full investigation to.
But it
determine.
would just fall under the law, right? I mean, if they couldn't.
We can't just do it like
Religion.
Not saying anything
in
but
public,
in the
but
news.
yes, we would investigate and take a look to determine whether or not it would fall under a specific use. And if that use was deemed cruel or
Sure.
unusual, so, yeah.
It's like if it involved a human or anything, same thing.
We have had that situation come up, and it was not an affirmative defense in that case.
It was what?
It was not an affirmative defense in that case, because of the way that the animal, bird, died.
And that's where we do have resources with the state vet's office, with Bureau of Animal Protection, that we do have those resources for those experts of vets at the state level to also weigh into this situation of what would be deemed proper and and that's also all regulated and monitored by the Colorado Attorney General's office, so that's something where we can reach out as well.
Yeah, because that's kind of.
That's its own discussion.
Yeah. So we'll have to move snow and ice likely to the next meeting.
And I did go ahead, we want to pass these out. As promised last meeting, this is all the codes. I believe so, Dave and I looked through it. I believe this is all the codes that this group and code
nice.
enforcement would have control over.
Thank you.
So this is the master list. If that's something where we don't each time have to determine which ones we're going through. If that's something where you want to start on page 1 and work your way through, I'll leave that to you guys to decide. If we just want to block out an hour every meeting, I can do that on the agenda, and you guys can decide what meeting, what articles you want to go through at that time.
That was perfect, thank you.
Yeah, this is great.
And if I did miss something, I can always get that printed, but I think it's covers
This is
almost
pretty
everything.
comprehensive. That's what would be in. what we would normally
So what are we gonna do next time? We're gonna, all of these?
No, you guys have already covered like 1 through, you're in Title 8 now, so you've basically covered page 1 through,
20?
yeah, you're halfway through this packet.
So we'll,
Start with Title, do you want to start with Title 8, where we left off?
well, we had originally had snow and ice, just because it's coming up.
Where was snow and ice?
It's the last
Right at
page.
the end of the packet that we have.
That's what I thought.
Well, do we want to do snow and ice and then just pick up, what did you say it was the next one, Dave? Title 8?
Yeah, then we can go back and we'll wrap around back to Title 8.
Building and safety.
Okay, so. What can we do?
So,
There's not much.
they didn't just. So you guys did Title 7 tonight.
There's nothing to really review for
So what do we
tonight.
do?
Well,
Not really.
snow and ice is the next
So-
one we really have info on.
Anyway, yeah.
Anything is snow and ice anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Title 11, and there's some stuff in Title 6 with health and sanitation. So maybe we suggest that we do snow and ice next time, and then Title 6, that's at the beginning of your packet.
Oh.
We can cover, and then
Health
that
and
way we'll be-
sanitation,
Yeah,
That way we'll be in order.
yeah, let's do that.
health and sanitation and snow and ice,
Mhm.
So this is for,
which includes animals and fowl.
You already did the
we
animals.
just did that.
Okay, we already did that.
Oh, I thought you were being funny.
So it goes right up to the beginning where we started with animals and fowls. So
Right.
we'll do Title 6 in October, and then we'll do the snow and ice. That work?
Yes. That works. Okay. So committee member's choice, is there anything, any committee member would like to bring up or mention or talk about?
Actually, I do.
Couldn't just say no.
I know. I'm going to take 2 minutes and that's it,
Okay.
because I don't know that it's really discussed. When I was privileged to be elected to the vice of this, I decided I'd go back into the bylaws a little bit. to see what-
Oh,
Okay. There's one bylaw which caught me by surprise.
I'm not resigning.
No, it's not you.
That was a joke.
Yes. Membership of the committee comprised of 7 members appointed by council. 3 ex officio members are selected by virtue of their position with the city. Who are those people? That's you guys. But you're also part of the next group, which says 2 city council liaisons shall serve as channel or means of communication.
And, you know, it's interesting. Originally, when I was appointed, when I got on at the end of 2015, there already was one. So it may have gotten changed that time to 2. And then, is there,
You all decided to change how many people would be on each board because it was kind of causing some conflicting stuff. And so it was determined that this board would only have one.
yeah, I think
Because
so.
almost all of them had 2.
Well, do they?
They did.
They
And
did.
so it was causing a lot of conflicting meetings and concerns and notifications. And so certain boards were determined to only have one. And this was one of them.
Okay. Is that something we should officially change in the bylaws? Or is it just we leave it the way it is? I mean, I'm just trying to clean up, stuff.
The committee could do that, could look at that. That's something you could look at.
We can throw that into.
Can we put it on the agenda for next time just to decide? Thank you. Told you the 2 minutes.
I do want to let you know, if you don't mind, I may have a family conflict that I'm trying to resolve for next month that I may not be able to attend the meeting, but you were in great hands with code with AJ.
AJ did
He's already
great.
proven that.
Yep. Did
Yes.
great the last couple. He just sat there, pointed and laughed at us. It was perfect. All right, and so that's committee members' choice. Topics for future meetings we just did, so we know which ones we're going to review. Adjournment. Adjournment.
Adjourn.
Next meeting, October 16th.
Great job, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You said the 16th?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Thanks.
Haircut.
I know.
I was like, wait, I know him. Oh, I do know him.
Yeah, it was getting too hot for the mullet, but